Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Red Room Live. Are we live, Miguel? Barely.
You're barely alive, but it should
I'm
be
barely alive because I'm sleepy, but
it should be
that's my
streaming.
usual state.
Yeah, it's streaming now. So we are online. This is the
Yeah.
second weekly stream, random musings, and
Well, it's a weekly stream until it's weekly. I'm joking.
it should be weekly. It's if it's not weekly, it will be
Well,
kind of weekly,
random. It's going to be. I was just going to say because
like
we
musings.
call it random, so it's random, but not that random.
We'll try to make it not too random. At least let's try to do it at the same time in the same day, even if it's not weekly. So while we are waiting for the two guests for this week, which will be Mark and Roger, we have a couple of announcements to make. The first one is Shadows of Olisipo, the Wretched Epoch setting in Portugal, more properly in Lisbon, has been revised and updated. The AI illustrations were replaced by public domain art of the time. I think we have, yeah, Mark is here now.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Hello.
Oh,
How are you guys doing this evening?
good.
Uh, Still awake.
Barely. I mean,
Okay.
I fell asleep in the sofa. To be honest, a bit before I had a power nap. So I already told Miguel I don't know how long I'm going to last today. How much do I have to long to last to say I'm pulling Avenger? It's like an hour.
I think it should be kind. Yeah, at
Yeah.
least
Okay,
at
that's
least
too much.
minutes.
But if it's the half of the time, then 1 and half an hour. I'm joking. How are you, Mark?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Just got off work here a bit ago. Ready for the weekend.
And Roger
Uh,
joined us. Roger is in space.
Hello.
Hello.
So you
so
want
go for it.
No, Miguel, because we're waiting, you were giving the news
Oh
update.
yes, I'll
You should
finish the
continue.
announcement. So I was
Yes.
just saying that Shadows of Olisipo has been revised. Some typos were corrected. The AI illustrations were replaced by public domain of the time. If you purchased it before, you can download the new version at the Red Room store
For free, as always.
for free. Yes, and if you haven't, well, you can check out the review. The review is basically the same thing, but the book you will see there is not doesn't look like it looks like right now. Some changes were made, so the art is not the same, the cover is not the same. So a few differences, but not that much. The review I'm mentioning is the RPG Pundits review.
Hmm.
I'm thinking about doing other revisions like this, not because I came to the conclusion that the AI is bad, but just because, well, it's an excuse to revise the books, and
Hmm.
so we are going to do that certainly with Savage Swords, but that one will be uh, it will have commissioned art, not public domain. Maybe I can find some public domain as well and stock art, but that one will be really revised and changed, and it will have human-made art by our usual collaborator Chris. And now that the announcement was made, let's go back to the live stream. So this is the second weekly live stream. Mark and Roger are our other hosts tonight. And I believe that the topic for tonight, unless you have something else to discuss, will be highs and lows of our gaming history. Gaming in role-playing game, of course, not video games.
Sounds good. Who wants to lead off?
Should we start with the highs or the lows? I have much more
Uh,
lows. So
Start with the lows. That way we can end on a high note.
okay, then yeah,
That's a good idea.
that makes sense. Okay, so who wants to start?
I'm not going to start because I think
Okay,
probably
sorry.
we share some lows, Miguel.
I thought
So
about it a bit ago, so I can start. So my lowest of the lows was Underground role-playing game. Underground was released, I think, in the mid '90s. At least that's when I played it. Mid '90s. Well, um, everything was low about it. The game itself, the mechanics were really not functional. At the time, I thought that the setting was kind of funny. Right now, I wouldn't find it funny at all. But that's because probably everybody involved in that game is woke now. I'm sure they are. That's an Atlas game, right? An Atlas game publishing. I think it is. Not sure about that.
Creeping retardation is a problem in the industry, yes.
Yeah. So it was a superhero game, kind of. But it was the setting was futuristic, kind of. Though it was supposed to resemble, so the characters were supposed to be veterans, U.S. veterans, but everything about it looked like they were like Vietnam veterans, but in a future war. And besides the mechanics being rubbish, I don't think the players understood exactly what they were supposed to be playing. So there was a guy that usually played those very heroic and very powerful characters. So you wanted to play Superman in that game, and it didn't work. Another guy did silly characters all the time, and in this game, I think being silly wasn't the problem, but it was too silly even for this game. So it was really awful. And the other one, he still plays with us occasionally. He did a romantic hero, which wasn't really for that game as well. So it was.
he always does a romantic hero.
Yeah, he always does. And for that game, it didn't work. So this was probably the lowest of the lows. We didn't play that long, just, I don't know, 5 or 6 game sessions. Then I gave it up. I just gave it up. It happened a lot at that time. I was trying lots of different games in different genres, and the groups didn't always pick up what the vibe. And in this case, this was really, really the worst of all.
But I think that would be normal. I mean, if you're trying a lot of games, you
Yeah.
risk having a lot of lows, right? Because it just doesn't connect with people.
Pretty low. I remember. I mean, I don't remember what happened. I don't remember the games. None of that, because it was very bad. It was so bad that I don't remember it. I erased it from my memory.
But that was just based on the mechanics, right? It wasn't, the players themselves or.
So the mechanics were bad. They didn't work for a superhero game. I don't remember why. Everything was bad about those mechanics. They were. I have no idea how they worked. I can't remember. I just remember that when we were trying to do the characters and understand how it worked, it was basically very rubbish, basically rubbish. And then the characters made it even all worse. And I was trying to run the game as it was supposed to be, but those characters weren't working with the setting. So yeah, it was a very bad experience. And hi, Lord Mateus.
Oh,
Okay, so who's next?
next? Oh, I got some doozies for bad ones. Like now we have all these people who want to play with X cards and Session Zero and lines and veils, which is okay to a point. Like I believe in fade to black. Like we don't have to describe things in detail. But years ago, we were playing over a guy's house. He was running Champions, and his wife was a player in it. So it was him running it. She, all superheroes. His wife, myself, one of the guys still play with. This guy Chris, who we gamed with back then, and maybe one other person. So we had played this a little bit. And this was the GM's favorite system. He loved superhero games. He loved Champions in particular. And we were in some scenario, and his wife starts talking to the guy Chris's character, and they start flirting with each other. So we're like, okay, that's normal in a game. The PC of the GM is not necessarily off limits, as a romantic interest, just because it's the GM's, husband or wife, or whatever. But they start chatting back and forth, and it starts getting like very, racy. So the rest of us are getting like uncomfortable. Like, okay, where's this going? And the husband's into it. He's like describing it, and okay, and then what? And then what do you? Okay, and then he said, oh well, and she's like, well, I'm going to do this to him, and then I'm going to take him here, and we're just sitting there like, okay, what are we witnessing here? Um, and and to this day we still talk about it, because like you wanted to hide under the table. You're like, am I dreaming this? Is this really going on? And it's funny because we never did like session zeros, or we just played a game, and you got to know the people, how the GM ran the game, how the other players were. Usually you played a little bit with the other players, so it was no big deal. You just transitioned from game to game, and most of the time you didn't have any issues, or minor issues. But that was weird because the one guy we had played with for a while, and we were kind of new to the GM and his wife, but we had played other games with them where they were players, so we didn't think it was anything, like this came out of left field, So to this day we still talk about like that's probably the strangest thing that we've ever experienced in a game, because we're like, okay, how do we, like we don't want to interrupt the game, but how do we voice our, disapproval, and even today, I don't think some of us would be like throwing the X, sign up, or, but we wanted to like run out of there. So it's just interesting, it's not something that happened too much years ago. Now, even with all these things in place, all these safety tools that people want to use, I still hear horror stories, and they're far worse than anything I had ever experienced, So I think for the most part, back in the day, we did okay. Those incidents were few and far between. Um, so that's, without being too descriptive, that's that story.
I'll have to say most of the groups I played with, if that sort of thing had gone on, it would have been like super gay. Because we didn't really have women playing with us back then. I think the closest I ever had to having an experience like that was I did have somebody who wanted to do the erotic role-playing book that came out for D20 way back in the day. I mean, this is nearly 20 years ago. And me and two other guys kind of noped out at that point. It was a group of about 8 people, and it's like, nah. No, we are definitely not here going to be doing erotic role-playing at this sausage fest. So, yeah. But believe it or not, while that was a similar experience to yours, it was not my worst experience. Oh, I had one lower than that. And I guess I'll go ahead and talk about it. So,
before you start with your lowest of the lowest, to reply to Lord Mateus, I kind of had a similar problem to this. It was not fantasy
Fantasy
games,
Flight game, Star Wars.
but it was Mutant Chronicles and Conan, which have kind of similar rules. I think the guy who did the rules is the same. And there were some problems with the dice, and not just the dice. What was those things called? Those
The points.
yeah, Those
They're not called points, they were tokens
no,
or
there was
something.
something else, but you had some
The
there
ships,
was
I know.
there was a cheap currency you have to exchange
They're
points.
basically little stones
Yeah,
or something like that, but I don't know
yeah,
what they're actually
it's
called.
a ridiculous thing, and I think that probably Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars is more or less the same thing.
I remember the first time we played Mutant Chronicles with those rules, it was just you and me were playing the one shots, the quick
Mhm.
start, and I just basically had to leave the building running because I didn't
Yeah,
understand the rules, so I was
yeah.
almost dying.
Neither did I at the time. So the
Then when
problem,
we played
not
after
this device,
understanding
but
the rules,
also those currencies.
after understanding it better, it kind of yeah. I mean, the second time we played, I didn't die.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mark. Go
Now you
ahead
can
and
go on and tell us what your
No,
terrible
that's
experience.
fine. No, that's fine. We
yeah.
should definitely pay attention when folks are commenting. But okay, my lowest of the lows that I can remember. There might be worse that I've simply forgotten because I've been playing off and on for a long time. But it was relatively recently. It was only about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was first getting into playing games on Roll20. Um, so there was this guy who was advertising a BX campaign, and it looked good. So me and a bunch of other people signed up for it, showed up. We interacted with the DM, talked about this, that, what we were going to do. We get to the game and we start playing, and we're talking about where our characters come from, and we come up with backstories for them, and we're just enjoying ourselves. We're getting into the game, um, and the the dungeon master starts getting a little bit weird. He says, "Well, where on the map is that?" And all this, this was Mystera, right? So this was the known what I originally heard called the known realms or the known world. So this is the world of BX gaming. And we were saying, well, no, these aren't real towns. They don't exist on the map. There's clearly towns that aren't shown on these maps. We don't all come from the one city in the Duchy of Karamikos. And so we were talking about, things that were connecting our characters and this and that. And I thought we were doing a really good job of pulling the party together. And the guy disappears. There are 5 players in the session, and the DM just ghosts. I mean, he literally just disappears.
So what he didn't like the characters doing any type of like world building that he wasn't directly
It
involved in.
it wasn't clear to us what the problem was, but there was something there that was annoying him, and he just vanishes. And we found out this was a pattern with this guy. So when we went back and checked, he had done this before. He would post various old school games like BX games or AD&D or just something old school. He would advertise it. He would pull in a few players. They would start playing the first session, and then he would just disappear. Something would happen that would like tick him off. And it's not like he would say, hey guys, we don't do that in my games, or we don't do this, or we don't do that, or how about we do this instead? He literally would just shut the game down. And to kind of cover up the fact that he did this a lot, he would eventually go back and like erase the original game that he'd set up because the word started to get around.
So he rage quits.
He literally rage quitted his own game.
That's really
Um,
strange. I never heard of a game. Well, I think it's rare, right, for a game master to quit or ghost his own
I,
game.
I've
Yeah,
seen.
I mean, he might kick you out, but rage quitting your own game and then just pretending like it never happened. Because
I
we
gamed.
reached out to him and said, dude, where'd you go? he never responded.
I gamed for years with 2 guys who would sabotage their own campaigns.
Really?
They would either lose, like the zeal for it, or they didn't like how it was going, or they ran out of ideas. And even if everybody was loving it, like, oh yeah, this is great, no, you should continue it, they would just self-destruct the campaign, and it we never understood it. We're like, well, if everyone's liking it, and you seem to like it, what's the big deal? But I guess either they weren't having fun or they just didn't know where to go with it. Maybe it sounded good on the outset, but then they, just wouldn't commit to it anymore. One guy, This was early when people started printing their own stuff on Lulu. So they would do like their own dream project RPGs, not for mass consumption, but just like vanity press stuff. So he was one of the first guys that I saw that did his own kind of rule set for D&D, where he took different rules that he liked. He combined it with like 3.5 or something. He later got into like Castles and Crusades, with playing that, but he would keep making these versions of his own homebrew rules. And every time he made a new set, he'd make us stop the campaign, make up completely new characters. We're like, but can't I just, keep the same character? No, we have to do it all over again because these are different rules. But they really weren't. Like he'd add a class or he'd change one little thing. So that was one of the guys who did it too. He was either self-destructing campaigns or he would want to tweak his new rules. And now, we haven't played with him in years. Now he's just like, he only plays board games. He's a person who suddenly, has to distance himself from social media because of chronic TDS, and so we're kind of glad that we don't play with him anyway. But it's just really bizarre.
This is a hobby that reveals kind of the oddities that you can run into. I mean, let's
Yeah, I
just
guess
be
so.
honest. Because you spend enough time in the hobby, you will eventually come across people who have their own little issues, folks who talk a good game about, they really want to run a campaign, and they don't even really have a reason. They'll start the game, they'll get going, you'll start to get into it, and then they
Yeah.
just drop it. But that experience with that one guy on Roll20 was the absolute worst I ever ran into, because it's like, who rage quits their own game and then doesn't even say why? It's like, what did we do? I thought we were being a very good gaming group. We were being really engaged and getting into building the party, and it's like, wow, this was going to be really fun, and then he goes away. Oh boy. But
Sometimes,
hey, he gives me a story.
I can tell you
sometimes,
mine, but I
uh,
think you need to put this last comment from Ulter because it's funny and gross.
Let's start with the first part. It was a City of Misadventure, and
It's the second one is when he explains it
I don't think
better.
yeah, he wrote the second part. So there was a foot fetish player.
geez.
This,
So
yeah,
you had a footsie. You had a footsie in the game.
I think the ultra should be here tonight because
But that's not so bad unless the player has a fetish for your feet. You know,
Yeah. Or if he's
like
rolling the dice, if he's rolling the
he
dice
didn't like
with
his
his
feet.
feet.
as long as he's not
It's like,
stealing people's
come on,
shoes.
DM, don't hide those feet. Put them up on the table, man. Oh my goodness.
Man,
I mean, I've never seen Hunter's feet, but maybe the guy,
They're lovely.
maybe that
I've
was.
never had the experience of one of my players being gay for me. It would probably cause me to run away from the hobby forever. I mean, hopefully
Now,
that will never happen.
would you just be totally horrified, or would you be horrified but also a little flattered?
No, I would be far too horrified to be flattered. That's the problem. I'd be tormented by the thought, wait a minute, why was he gay for me?
But
What's wrong?
wasn't there wasn't there wasn't
I
there
might
like a
have
talk?
the wrong
There was
signal.
there was a talk show where two guys had been friends for years, and it turned out, one
Oh,
guy was gay for the other guy, and um, I think like after that, the one friend killed the other friend because he couldn't I guess reconcile
Oh, we
that
went to the TV show to say how he's in love with that
yeah,
guy, right, or something like that, which was
yeah,
really stupid. I mean, if you want to tell it, don't tell it on national TV in front of everybody.
He
yeah,
told him,
You're
I
letting them
remember
not
what you're
feel
talking
well.
about. Yeah. He told,
yeah.
we could probably find that somewhere, but yeah, he told him on national television on one of those really crappy shows. Okay, we agree, man. We don't want to see your feet. We're happy. Thank you for the warning. Anyway.
okay, another tragic story.
Oh no, custom class.
Okay, that one is a little bit more common, I think. but
You know,
tragic.
it's like he invites the wife so he can continue to play. What are you doing with your friends? What do your friends do? Is there anything I need to know about what you and your friends do? Gaming widow.
There's definitely some, spouses, girlfriends,
Hi, Jeff.
have
Now it's
Hey.
time for you to share your gaming horror story. I'm sure you have a lot, probably including us. I don't know.
Mine includes you.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm going to say as a disclosure, since we're talking about gaming
Maybe we
live,
should start now before you fall asleep.
yes, that I may have kicked some players out of your. No, I'm kidding. I never did. I try not to be a bitch. Sometimes it's hard. But the worst, I think, for me was when you played Infinity.
Oh,
You
fuck.
know, that session. So we tried to start. Well, it was we had a first campaign of Infinity that actually is going well, but then the guy disappeared because they got mad at us because of wokeness. Then we started playing with another guy, with another group with whom we already had played Mutant Chronicles. But one of the guys, I don't know what's going on. He completely didn't understand the setting of Infinity, or he didn't like it. So he decided. So Infinity is this. It's not cyberpunk exactly. How should we
No,
describe it?
no, it's
It's space opera, but it has a lot of. It's a bit of manga and anime. But it has a lot of AI. So the guy decided he would James Bond. So he decided he would be James Bond, and because there was AI, he would spend the whole session in the bar of the casino, and we won't have to do anything because, well, I'll just ask the AI to do something. So we totally killed the session. It was the last time we played with him. And whenever my character tried to say, "Oh, I'm going to go out and do something," he's like, "Oh, but are you stupid? Why are you going to do that? We don't walk. We ask the AI to do stuff for us." I think that was our worst.
Oh, gracious.
okay. Jed will share some stories.
I wasn't even counting.
Do you agree that was the worst one that involved both of us?
Yeah, yeah,
It'll,
yeah. Yeah, I was expecting that. Yeah.
yeah.
I just remembered one thing. One time, this is just a scene. I was playing Call of Cthulhu in the 1890s, and I had a player that shouldn't be playing a horror game. Basically, shouldn't be playing it. So there was I remember the scene. I think it was a pre-made pre-made game. There was some kind of ghost poltergeist activity, and he was in a room, and everything was moving. And the guy just takes his shotgun and he starts shooting the bed. This was the most stupid thing. By telling it like that, it's not funny, but it was ridiculous. He was just shooting pieces of the bed because the bed was possessed or something. And then,
That was Luis,
of
the other
course,
Franco, of course.
So does he have a chemical habit?
This guy, it was the same guy who would try to play Superman in Underground RPG. He always tried to play the wrong kind of character everywhere, and he should never play a horror game. He should have never played a horror game. Then he quit. He just never played a horror game again. And I tried to keep him away as well. So not every style of game is for everybody. That's something that we have to understand.
That's true.
No, that's true.
I think I was thinking about a friend of mine that I grew up with. He, a lot of times we played games with very small groups. We didn't have a lot of people, but you figure like people for years, you have like an idea of how they would react as gamers, in any situation, how they would play a character. But we were playing Heroes Unlimited at the time, and it was an adventure from I think Palladium had like the Palladium newsletter or something. It was like a newsprint thing, that you could send away for, and it would usually have some adventures in it. So one was like a TV adventure, like your characters are investigating something, and you get basically trapped in TV land. So anything that exists in like TV or movies, you could, put it into the game. So, we're I think at the time it was just him and another player, and I'm running it and they're being zapped in between different like TV channels basically. So they end up on Gilligan's Island. So now in Heroes Unlimited, you can have a character who's basically like a hero, but like an anti-hero. I think his alignment was anarchist. Um, and he had some weird like psychological damage to his character. So what he ended up doing was we get to Gilligan's Island and I said, okay, this is going on, this is going on. And he looks for Mrs. Howell. And I'm like, okay, and he's like, okay, where is she? So he finds her. Oh, is she alone? And I said, okay, where's this going? So either I rolled or I arbitrarily decided, like, yeah, she's alone. So basically, his superhero character went into her hut and he says, I want to strangle her with her pearls. And then he proceeded to, basically violate her. And my friend was
Oh,
kind of like straight laced and kind of normal, but he had a good sense of humor and stuff like that. And we were having a good time. It's not like he was upset over everything or he had purposely wanted to like destroy a campaign. But he basically kills this fictional TV character. So now I'm thinking like, what's the moral implications here? Like they're not real people because it's TV land, but even so, like should his character be doing that? And then I think one of the other characters found out and he became like a villain in the campaign, because they couldn't, even though it was like a fictional event, like they're like, wow, you're a sicko. But we never understood like why he chose to do that with his character. Like he wasn't necessarily a villain. It was just some weird thing that he decided to do. Maybe he had like a deep rooted hatred of Gilligan's Island. I don't know. Um, but it was just odd behavior, and I'm running it. So I'm like, yeah, I didn't see this coming. Um,
Did he usually do stupid things out like, or that it was the only time?
he had some characters who were kind of like loose cannons, but nothing that overt or sadistic or it was just odd, And sometimes when you're playing with your friends, maybe they have it in for you for something else, or that wasn't it at all. Like nothing had happened. He wasn't trying to be a jerk or anything. It just I don't know. It was like some kind of weird fantasy he had in mind for the character, and that's how he chose to go about it, but we found it really weird, and now years later I don't really talk to that guy anymore. I don't even think he plays role-playing games anymore, but it just sticks in my head as like another weird moment.
I don't understand any references to Gilligan's Island because I never watched it. It was never. I don't think it ever ran here, did it, Sylvia?
I don't
Yeah, really,
think so.
he had a
Not
choice.
agora escolha. No.
I don't think so. Yeah.
given that one inspiration I created, I will remain silent on the whole Gilligan's Island thing.
Yeah, I remember that. Also, I didn't understand the reference as well. I don't know the characters. I just know there's the show is always people are always mentioning it, and then I never understand any references.
Despite the impression the inspiration might have given, I actually grew up loving Gilligan's Island. I thought it was a great show. I used to watch all those shows: Gilligan's Island, Lost in Space, late boomer entertainment. But that's
I
kind
never
of
watched. I don't
We
think
didn't have much of a choice, like reruns. You
Gen
watch
X got stuck with boomer leftovers.
they show those old shows frequently in the 80s. They were old.
70s for me. Hogan's Heroes, the original Star Trek.
The Gilligan's is from the 60s?
It is.
Originally
I think that
it
one
started in
started
the
in
60s,
64. 64. Ran for 4 seasons and then they reran it forever.
Oh, I thought it was longer. 4 seasons, not long.
No, believe it or not, it was only 4 seasons.
He was in.
Yeah.
He was also in like a version of it was kind of like Lost in Space. It was called Far Out Space Nuts, and it was a
He
Croft,
was.
it was a Croft
Yeah.
production. I think Chuck McCann was the other character. Played the other character.
Oh, he became famous playing a character on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. He played a character named Maynard Krebs,
Yeah, Maynard
who
G.
was
Krebs.
like Maynard G.
Beatnik.
Krebs, who was the show's beatnik.
Yeah.
And he just did a fantastic job of it. And it's like, then he starts showing up on other shows and they realize he's a really good comedic actor. So that's when he gets Gilligan's Island. And what's so funny about that is Tina Louise apparently had been led to believe, you got to wonder how much truth there is to their recollections. But Tina Louise always claimed that she thought the show was supposed to be built around her character.
Well,
And
but
it's like,
that one,
Oh,
Is that
yeah.
true, or is that something that she said, like in real life?
that's what she said.
No,
That she thought it was, and that she had essentially been tricked into the show.
no.
And it's like it was a show with Bob Denver named Gilligan's Island. How could you be deceived? But anyway, yeah. So Adam West, I loved Adam West
Yeah.
Batman, and yes, I also watched that show as a kid. And yes, I know it's goofy. I understand that it's goofy, but when you're a kid, you love it. I also never missed the Green Hornet when it came on, but it was much rarer to get the Green Hornet than Batman. Batman was all over the place.
I think what kids grow up with now, though, it definitely influences them, because even the campy shows or what have you, you always knew who the good guy was, and he tried to set an example. And now all these kids see is like dark Batman, and even George Lucas made a mistake with the Star Wars prequels because he made Anakin the hero. Well, Anakin's not the hero.
He's
If
the
anything,
villain.
it should be Obi-Wan. So he sets these little kids up who grew up with the prequels to, Anakin, he's the hero. So now Anakin kills people, including young children, and he has a justification. Well, I'm doing it because. So, again, like, who are your role models growing up? I had like Adam West Batman. I had, all the comic book heroes who were strong, male role models. And, I had Magnum PI, and I had, Michael Knight and all these other people. And who do the kids have now? Maybe Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. It's kind of sad.
It's really ambiguous. I think most of it's going to end up being eventually certain cartoon characters. You're going to laugh, but like a character like SpongeBob SquarePants is probably closer to the goofy heroes of 1960s sitcoms than almost anything else you've got out there right now.
Yeah,
He's just this
maybe.
little guy making his way through life. He's a complete dingbat, but he's also completely harmless, and ultimately is trying to do the good thing, even if he doesn't precisely know how.
Yeah. But a lot of what the kids are watching now, every character has a justification of, I can do something bad because, whether it was something bad was done to them, or,
Yeah.
or they have the
Well, that's
ones,
how you get a generation of evil people.
or you have the characters who are set up to be, I'm super awesome because, like, they don't prove it. It's not through their character. It's I can do this, or I have this super ability, but nothing about their moral fiber is basically teaching them how to be a hero.
I can't say anything about this because I also liked the anti-heroes when I was a kid. But
Yeah,
I have,
but there were less of them,
yeah, and they were probably friendlier. I don't know,
Yeah.
perhaps.
I mean, I liked my Charles Bronsons and Dirty
But they
Harry.
probably
Stuff
were
like that too.
different at that time. Yeah, not the
Yeah.
same type of anti-hero that we have
Oh,
here.
you had the anti-heroes, but you had the heroes as well. So you just
Yeah.
pick the ones you prefer, but you still watch the whole thing. And the anti-hero.
How often are the people we think of as anti-heroes really anti-heroes, though?
Mhm.
I mean, was Dirty Harry in the movies an anti-hero, or was Dirty Harry a soiled paladin?
I think when you say that someone is an anti-hero, what they mean is that they're a hero, but they're not a paladin. So they're not the classic cut.
Yeah, they have flaws.
They always have
They
to be.
do bad
Yeah.
things
With
to
flaws.
get the bad guy.
I always prefer the heroes with flaws than the flawless ones. They are kind of annoying and boring.
I think
Well, by that standard, I guess Dirty Harry would be an anti-hero, but I don't know. It's a very interesting question. Maybe I ought to look into that and think about it some, because to me, there's always that weird dividing line. Where do you cross the line from that soiled paladin, like the classic example of what I'm talking about would be, Philip Philip Marlowe. Philip Marlowe, you read his stories, he's constantly up to his neck in dirt. I mean, he lives in an extremely nasty version of Los Angeles. And yet he's always trying to do the right thing, even as he sometimes is unable to deal with the consequences of failure. He ends up, like the author himself, he ends up becoming an alcoholic. Things fall apart for him. He becomes very cynical. But he I would call the classic soiled paladin, because he will draw a line and he will not cross it, and he will not abandon the innocent. And he will take risks for people who oftentimes don't really deserve it. So I wonder what that dividing line is. Where do you cross the line from the soiled paladin to the anti-hero?
Would you say an example of some character that you'd call an actual anti-hero?
A true anti-hero?
True
Elric of Melniboné. He is one of the least sympathetic, quote-unquote, heroes I've ever seen in fiction.
Who is that?
I enjoy reading the books, but Elric deserved to be killed by Stormbringer, and I hope I didn't spoil anything for anyone. He was a louse. And, the irony is he was accompanied by a true companion to heroes in Moonglum, right? So Moonglum is all of us looking at Elric doing nasty, terrible, horrible,
I'm just going to do this. I never read them all. So going,
Okay. And he will occasionally comment to that. And he'll say, I despise your cynicism. And Elric will just shrug his shoulders. He doesn't care. He's this bloodless albino who survives by dint of sorcery and a magical sword.
But that's written from the standpoint of someone who didn't want like a Conan character. He didn't want the strong hero type. He wanted he
didn't want Aragorn. He was wanting the antithesis of the hero.
Yeah, he's the physically affected character who has something wrong with him. He has to make tough choices as far as sacrificing part of his humanity to succeed. So it's functions differently, I guess. But I never read through all the Elric stories. After all these years, people tell me, "Oh, you got to read it," But it seems pretty good so far. I just kind of dived into it.
I never read it, any of it.
Yeah, me neither. So
I think I draw the line in a different place. I think that for me, when I say that I prefer anti-heroes, I'm referring to any character that isn't. It doesn't have to be unsympathetic. It can be just a flawed character. So that would include many characters from many books and movies.
I think that's why
any character like Clint Eastwood, for example.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. See, there's another one where I think his characters, in my view, would oftentimes be soiled paladins rather than anti-heroes, although he definitely did play some anti-heroes. Oh, yes.
I think that's why Spider-Man always resonated with people, because not that he is called like an anti-hero, but he has flaws. He has regular everyday problems. He doesn't always make the right decision. He had terrible things happen, like Gwen Stacy and stuff like that. So that made the character more real to people. I guess when someone feels that this hero could be them, if they were given those powers,
it's more human.
It makes it more believable. Because what would I do in that situation if I had to take care of my sick aunt, and pay her mortgage and all these other things, that's just one example. But I guess there's a lot of there's a broad spectrum, for heroes, like where they can appear. and they're always more believable when they're relatable.
I think there's only one problem with that, is that heroes cease to be aspirational if they become too flawed. I think that's the only problem with that.
Yeah,
and that's
maybe.
particularly true in fiction aimed at young people. But even in fiction for adults, it's difficult for me to imagine. I mean, you could argue that Aragorn has flaws, but they're a hero's flaws. They're not flaws in the sense that you or I would think about it. Your typical Numenorian would walk around New York like a demigod. We're just not up to that standard.
I have a friend who hates Superman because he's like, oh, well, Superman's boring. And he's got all these powers. He can do anything. And the best Superman stories are ones where he has to function without his powers, or he has to use restraint. Like, yeah, I could crush that person's head like a grape, but I can't. So how do I get around that? How do I resolve the situation without using my powers? And those to me are interesting stories, because if you're just writing a character who can do anything, yeah, sure, that's going to get boring over time, or you have to keep putting threats in, just like with the role-playing game, keep putting threats in that are so powerful that it becomes ridiculous. Like, okay, what is it this week? But, sometimes the normal everyday things, or the challenges that are mental, they have to be overcome with, the character's conviction or their approach to problems is a lot more interesting, and that's what makes a good role-playing game too. Like, it's not just, oh, I have this feat and this skill and I can do this, but okay, what'd you do with that character in that story? How did you get past that magical door? How did you defeat that villain? Because sometimes it's not just what you can do, your powers and abilities. It's what you do with them.
True. So we wandered far afield from our gaming lows.
Yeah.
The Punisher is an anti-hero.
The Punisher is an anti-hero. Yeah.
Yeah, he is, and I think he's an intentional anti-hero, but he's not an anti-hero in the sense that you see in some fiction. He's an anti-hero by the standards of superhero comics because he rejects the code against killing.
Yeah.
He's actually more like Batman was originally, which is kind of interesting.
Batman started with a gun when he first.
Batman killed people.
Yeah.
And his audience approved because the comics were written for adults and they knew that criminals and gangsters were bad guys. I mean, he was a fantasy of a wealthy aristocrat taking on a corrupt system, which kind of resonated with Depression era audiences.
That's part of the problem today with the culture and society, though, too, is that the average person doesn't believe, now that the criminals should be punished. Like, oh, it's not really their fault. It's systemic and society, and they grew up poor and stuff like that. But, the average person in 30s and 40s, if they figured, like, if someone was despicable, whatever happened to them was deserved. They went to jail. They, got executed. Okay, get this person out of circulation. But now we have a lot of people who, even some people who are good, but who are kind of bleeding hearts. They go, oh, well, maybe, we can get them into the right program. We can, but the fact is that there are some people who are irredeemable, and, you let them out of prison early, you just keep, coddling them. They're going to keep doing the same things over and over again. So, now you put that into a fictional environment where, how does the character deal with that? You have a character who's either, gonna try to keep apprehending them, like Batman, and they end up in Arkham and break out again, or you have a character like the Punisher, who, he's gonna off these people because he doesn't have superpowers. It's very easy for, the powered character to say, hey, you shouldn't kill that guy. Well, all Punisher has is armor and bullets and training. That's it. So to stop them, he doesn't even have that ability to use the same restraint.
He doesn't care to anyway. The Punisher doesn't see a reason. His logic is, if I let them live today, they'll kill someone else tomorrow. So I'll stop it now.
Which makes sense.
And he's got the same background as Batman almost, in that, his family was killed at a picnic by mobsters, so
yeah,
they already took away
because he was
him.
a news reporter, and they wanted to eliminate him.
Or the Punisher?
Yeah, I believe that was how it originated.
I thought he was just
They have changed his background so many
yeah.
times.
That was an original. Originally, he was just a vet, and he happened to be with his family. I think he was
That's what
either
I
on
remember.
leave.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he was a veteran. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know when they tried to make him Clark Kent.
I don't
With
remember.
Marvel, they do all kinds of weird stuff.
I seem to remember that happening around the Thomas Jane Punisher movie era. That was the one where John Travolta was the arch enemy.
Mm.
I don't know. It's they played with the character a lot because I think the people who write him are very uncomfortable with him.
Yeah,
Nowadays, it's not the character that can be.
that's true. That comment.
Well,
The only
they've
thing about
broken
Batman,
Batman,
the only
basically.
thing about Batman is that the death of his parents, what was done to them, that's also part of his vow, is that he doesn't kill because his parents were killed. He doesn't want to become like his enemy. Um, so that's his personal decision, I guess. And that when they break the character from being like that, it stops being Batman for me. Like even the what was it, the first Michael Keaton movie, the Batmobile, the things pop off, and it's got machine guns, and he blows up Axis chemicals, and you know, even back then, I'm going, yeah, that's not really Batman.
Well, the problem, like my personal opinion is that they kind of broke the character in the 80s with all this oddball stuff they started doing with him. They basically turned him into a
Yeah,
mental case. And that's not the Batman I grew up with. The Batman I grew up with was Adam West. And that Batman, the Silver Age Batman, was just this kind of, midnight paladin. He had to work as a vigilante, but he wasn't really an opponent of the police. They kind of grudgingly accepted him because they had problems they couldn't handle within the limits of the law. So he
yeah,
became a kind of safety valve for the corrupt city of Gotham. Interesting show to contrast with later versions of Batman. I've always been a little uncomfortable with them turning Batman into a mental case because if a lot of the things he does are the result of mental health issues, then all the accusations that he's just as bad as the people he fights start sounding more reasonable.
yeah,
He's just as crazy as Joker. It's just his insanity goes in a different direction. He ends up being less like the Batman that was invented in the Batman we grew up with. He becomes more like what's that weird serial killer show, Dexter or something?
yeah,
He becomes like that guy, and it's like I don't like that guy. I don't like that kind of Batman.
yeah.
For me, it was kind of weird because I watched the Adam West show after I read the comics, and I was like, "This is not the same character. This is totally
Yeah.
weird. Like two Batmans or whatever." I never understood it.
I think in the late 70s, because of when I grew up, the late 70s, early 80s Batman, he was still dark, and he wasn't campy like the TV Batman, but he wasn't over the top either. Like, even like it still worked. Like he was still like the mysterious character, but he wasn't goofy, but he wasn't like you said, like a psychopath. And that was just,
I
I
mean,
think, the
we
best
have
version of the
versions of
character.
Batman out there now that are basically loons.
Yeah.
Um,
Judd, it's lying, Voltron. Stop. Don't even be ridiculous.
Guys, I'm going to pull Avenger now. And by the way, could
oh
you hear
dear.
the cats running around and mewing in the background?
No.
I saw them
No?
running around,
Okay,
yes.
but
I
not
saw
hearing.
one.
Okay. Okay.
New, but I don't think it was in
Yeah,
there.
they're crazy. I think they need. Yeah, maybe because the light is on, they're going crazy. Yeah.
Of course, they're going crazy. They're kids.
I don't have any high to moments to talk about in role playing games, so I'll just leave.
You don't have any higher?
No, I'm
Oh,
joking. Yes, I do, but
that is depressing.
So what are
I
the
will
high
leave that
moments?
for another. I will leave that for another day.
Okay, you can tell the story.
Yeah, my brain is starting to close down.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye bye.
Right.
Bye.
Bye
Goodbye.
bye.
I can't say bye bye because you're in the same place.
I guess you can just say good night then.
Yeah, yeah. She'll probably sleep when I finish this.
Yeah, maybe Batman power naps. That's
Maybe he has some specialized mental routine that eliminates most of his requirement for sleep.
yeah.
Something he learned in the Far East, a mental discipline.
Well, I kind of liked in the Michael. What was it? Michael, was it the first Batman Michael Keaton one? At one point, he's either like sleeping upside down like a bat, or he's doing he's doing some kind of exercise
Yeah,
where
it
he's
was in the
pointed
first
upside
one.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that
yeah.
was
He had
amusing.
one. He had one of those upside down like back stretcher things. Yeah, yeah. He was hanging upside down like a bat. I mean, obviously that was the reference.
Yeah.
So, gaming highs. People will want to hear about at least some of those. Miguel, do you have any gaming highs you would share?
I think this is not just an episode, but I can consider that Welcome to St. Cloud was my gaming high. I ran that in the early 2000s, the first time, of course. The group was my then girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend. A, a guy was in love with narrative games. He was always trying that I would run something that would be about real stuff. So welcome to St. Cloud World. There was a theater guy, theater kid. He wasn't really a role player, but he was playing some games at the time. And there was another guy as well. And it did work for these people because besides myself and one of those guys, most of the others weren't really interested in role playing games. One was interested in story games, which is not the same thing. And my ex-girlfriend was not a gamer, and the other guy was not a gamer as well. So the fact that I picked up that thing in particular, actually I didn't pick it up. I wrote it at the time, especially because I was trying to get this group of players into the game. So I decided that the closest thing that would interest people who are not really into role-playing games would be, first of all, something horror, and second, soap opera-ish in style. So I picked Twin Peaks as an inspiration because of that, and then we didn't play for long, at least not in a role-playing game campaign. Kind of long. It was just 1 year and a half. But for a horror game, it's a long campaign. So it was definitely my high. And then we played it again recently, 6 years ago or 5 years ago, and then we repeated it again. And it always worked. So for me, definitely, Welcome to St. Cloud is always my highest point.
All right, who's next?
Why don't you go, Roger?
I think I had a lot of good campaigns that I played in, or I was lucky enough to run, and a lot of good moments. But a couple of good moments, like I ran a Star Wars game, the D6 West End, and one guy, one of our friends, Steve, he was playing. I guess he was like almost like a rebel operative. He had some kind of weird background that he was former ISB, Imperial Security, but he was part of the regular group, and they were in some kind of like secret Imperial research facility. I forget if it was on a ship or a moon. I was running the game, and there was like a Star Destroyer, that showed up or was parked nearby. So he's trying to communicate with them and bluff them into thinking that he's an Imperial officer and he's giving them a directive. And I said, yeah, sure, go for it. So I think the skill he used was either command or con. And, in Star Wars, you use the wild die. You have your D6s, and you can get a decent reroll. Especially like if you do something like use a force point. So he rolled an incredible amount of dice, but just like rolled a sick, crazy roll, and it was so high that basically his bluff was to tell this guy that, yeah, the rebels are escaping, they're going to escape, the facility is compromised, and all the Empire's secret data is going to be stolen. I'm ordering you to fire on this facility. So they were already on their way out, but they basically bluffed the Star Destroyer, captain or admiral, whatever, into opening fire on this facility. So I guess that's an example. Like, if you're the GM of a game and your players pull, something, pretty cool or a good role, and they're excited about it, you want that to have meaning. So I basically decided, well, that's enough to make this poor, guy who shows up, this poor Imperial captain, to go, oh, you're very assertive. You must be telling me the truth. So he opened fire on the weapons facility, wherever it was, blowing it up, and they had a good time. They thought that was really cool. But we've had some high points like that where either someone came up with a good idea or had like a crazy role, and the way we narrated it was just fun, for everybody. Um, and sometimes you don't remember campaigns from years ago. Every little bit that happened, but you have those high points where it was fun for everybody.
I had fun with Star Wars as well.
Yeah, it was good system.
Yeah, the white system. It was very, very good.
So I've had a number of high points of the years, but the one that's always stuck out in my head, I was invited after graduating high school, me and a lot of other kids, to go to this kind of state-sponsored summer retreat for kids who are considered talented and gifted or a good fit for, I suspect, Kentucky public universities, whatever. So they pulled a bunch of us in there. And of course, it was a bunch of kids who had just graduated high school. So I think it was meant to be serious, but it just turned into debauchery. So there was a group of us who, instead of engaging in the alcohol and chasing girls, we found a basement in a building that was being completely unused, and it was extremely creepy. But it had a lot of old chairs and couches and stuff. So we just went down there and appropriated it as a game room. And some of these guys had not even played role-playing games before. And I had, for no particular reason, brought Call of Cthulhu, Stormbringer, and Champions with me. And we just started playing games instead of doing anything that we were supposed to be doing.
That's cool. And
that
zero
was
zero alcohol girls? Like you couldn't squeeze them into that role-playing schedule?
I mean, we just weren't interested. We were having too much fun doing this. That's what made it a remarkable high. It was the first time as a young gamer. I mean, I was waiting to, start my college career. It was the first time we'd really been away from home. We start playing these games and we get entirely immersed in them. We would start playing about 7 or 8 o'clock at night after everybody had supper. And sometimes we would game till like 4 a.m. in the morning. And I was usually running the games, and the ones that they really enjoyed the most were Call of Cthulhu. These guys would get jumpy at like 2 a.m. in the morning as I was describing something particularly horrible that came from beyond the stars and was exsanguinating some poor soul right next to them while they were in a situation where they didn't have many options in terms of escape. And, you got to remember, it was a basement, so they didn't have a lot of light to begin with. Half the time I was having to make it up because I couldn't read the module properly. But they didn't care. I mean,
like Eldritch horrors in the basement.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't know any better.
That's Abraham's jam.
So we were just, that was that will always stick with me. I've had a lot of highs since then. I've had some really great experiences. I had a lot of fun playing in the living campaigns in the early 2000s during the third edition and 3.5 era. I mean, I've had a lot of fun, but that was the first time, because I'd done some gaming before that, but you're in school, you have homework, there are limitations. This was the first time we really went kind of crazy, and we spent a whole week doing this. It was just night after night. And of course, we'd sleep late the next morning and not go to this or that lecture, because this was the first time they had done this particular program, and they weren't actually enforcing any rules. So it became gaming camp. So yeah, that would be the high point that would stick out in my mind. And again, it would not be the first time. It would not be the last time. It was the first time. It would not be the last time that I and a bunch of guys had a very long game session or series of game sessions. At cons, of course, particularly in the early 2000s, that was very common for people to play nearly 24 hours. But it was really something that left an impression on me. And they were really into it. I mean, it's nowadays it can be kind of hard to find a gaming group that takes what you're doing seriously. They had no problem with it. I mean, even the guys who'd never done this before were totally into it. And, we were in an old building, so, if it got a little windy and something creaked, somebody would jump. It was really cool. So we had a lot of fun. So that's kind of my high point story, because that's the first time that ever really happened. And we basically had a whole week of that kind of fun going on. That sort of thing can pull you in the hobby and keep you there.
And did you ever play like in the wilderness that you decided to go camping and completely off the grid and get all of those natural sounds playing tricks on your mind?
No. This all happened inside a building. That tends to be where I've played most of my stuff. I've never done the camping thing and gamed at the same time.
Well,
Usually we were doing other things.
I never did that either. No. Just always at home. Never in the basement as well.
When you think about it, the like people playing role playing games, it's kind of like how people used to tell stories, like around a campfire, recite sagas, folklore, stuff like that. So it's kind of like the carrying on that tradition almost.
I think it would be much more intense in case of tabletop RPGs, because when you're telling a story, you're like the narrator, distancing yourself. And I'm going to tell you a story about the characters. But in tabletop RPGs, you are there. You are those characters.
From what I understand, I think though, like some cultures like actually would act out the parts, like not just the person telling the story, but at that point, I guess people knew these stories because it's part of their heritage, so they would, almost like a play, but take part in it.
That's another important point, because when you're doing the play, usually you are following a script, and you're not describing your actions. You're actually acting like an actor. Like the reason why Tom Cruise doesn't describe, I am pulling my gun and I am pointing at they do it.
So yeah, you have more ability to visualize and I guess direct the action of your character than a regular story. So there's that to it. Do we lose Mark?
I don't know. Did we? Oh, he has no sound. Yeah, he muted himself. Maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did okay. Yeah, there was some noise in the background, so I figured I'd spare you guys.
Sometimes the noises are a bit strange, especially if you aren't seeing what is happening around you.
Who did you throw on the wood chipper?
Just the usual pedos, commies.
Oh yeah, that sounds good. Appalachian Trail.
So, Abraham,
I've never done that.
Do you have any story to share about your highs or lows?
In my case?
Yeah.
Highs or lows? Well, my lows were like the the early days of my tabletop RPG experience, because some people have already heard about this story, but a lot know that I got my origins in tabletop RPGs in a like a low class joint. It's kind of like a hobby shop combined with a bar. So that's where I learned to learn to play tabletop RPGs, but it was a horrible experience. We're talking about they didn't have proper miniatures. They had like a Tecate beer can, like the Mexican beer, and we had like these little plastic Thundercats figurines, but all stained with Cheetos and Doritos and whatnot. And they were like, it was a horrible session. But I still had the, how you say, the drive. Like I was thinking, this can't be it. So then I started to learn by myself, and I went to the U.S. because the U.S. is the mecca of tabletop RPGs. That's where the whole thing started. So I got my stuff, my introductory box set for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition, but I still couldn't learn it quite well. Like I was still very clumsy. Like what do you do? I'm going to I'll attack the darkness. Like typical memes. But then I went back to the U.S. a second time, and I saw the Texan game master, this Texas guy, like a blonde, blue-eyed guy, running the smoothest session you can imagine. And it just took me about like an hour of observing him, and I was like, this is it. This is the proper way of running tabletop RPGs. And then I understood that perhaps this guy was following the Dave Arneson tradition. So I could say that like my highest was when I had that realization, at least for me, because everybody can play tabletop RPGs however they like. If you want to play like a beer and pretzels storytelling, do it, and don't let anyone stop you. There is no gate. No gate can keep you from playing tabletop RPGs. But for me, like that other way of actually role playing, it was like a great revelation. And all of my lowest parts were my clumsy game master, dungeon master games, not being exactly sure what I was doing on the table with those dice and miniatures.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that, but yeah, of course, in the beginning, there are always lows.
Well,
I forgot.
it's like when a young guy is first learning how to approach a woman, and or like a groom, on his wedding night or something like that. He might be clumsy, doesn't really know what he's doing, but like especially game mastering, like you find out what works for you, and it might also change with the people you're playing with, the type of group that you have, but you find like your style, and some people are very adamant about like, I do it this way, that's the best way, that's the only way to do it, but that's not true. It's your way to do it. It's how you're comfortable with it, what works for you. What works for you might not work with somebody else.
I think it depends on honesty and definitions. Like for example, if I tell you, I always role play in my sessions, and I start playing, and I'm like, okay, so that reminds me of that time when I saw this Twitter post. Yeah. Go ahead and roll the dice to see if you hit. Oh yeah, you did, but you didn't even describe the attack or who are you hitting, who are you targeting with that laser rifle or whatever. So there are people that tell you, and that's how I role play. But you weren't role playing at all. You were just talking about the characters and about what you saw on Twitter, and you didn't even
Yeah.
describe who you were attacking. So I think it's important to like have that honesty. Like if you want to, hey, I play this game with like a conversation, like okay, or like I tell stories about Dungeons and Dragons, fine. But they are like when I role play, yeah, I'm always role playing all the time, and they are like talking about what Kim Kardashian did in who knows when, and they start to do this, not even describing their attacks. Yeah, like who are you kidding yourself? Don't kid yourself, right? Yeah.
The
My,
thing
my friend Hector runs D&D, like he was running it. He's his homebrew campaign from the 80s, but now he uses 5e, and he loves to talk politics. So when we go to his house, like the first hour and a half is just BSing about entertainment, politics, you name it. And even during the game, sometimes we launch in tangents, which is not good because you don't get as much accomplished. Once we're in the zone, we're immersed, but we all admit that we have a tendency to like go off into tangents. So there's definitely something to be said about reining in what you're doing so you get more accomplished. But we also have a good time because we don't see each other as often. So sometimes it's catch up. When you've been friends for years, you talk about the wife, the kids, the job, whatever. So it depends. I notice more like if I play online things where it's a finite amount of time. There's less like dicking around. We get to it. We drop into roles. And that's that. Maybe a little banter, but very minimum. So
Yeah,
again,
it's
it's different.
more or less my experience as well. We
Yeah,
usually spend half an hour just chatting, and then when we start playing, because we are online, and now we are recording as well, so we're not going to bore people. If someone decides to watch it, which I don't think anyone watches it, but if someone decides to watch it, it would be annoying to be interrupted by chat about some other stuff. But we usually, sometimes when we were playing live, we would talk about stuff. But we would interrupt. So now we are not playing; we are just chatting, and then we get back to playing.
yeah,
It's possible to do that, but it's better
I,
to do it before than interrupt the session. Which
exactly. In my opinion, it's much better to have like that time before the session and that time after the session, and then you get to play. I actually did a video just today, I think, based on a comment by one of my players, Nikos, because he said, "Wow, last session it was so action packed, and we did this and that." And I told him, "Well, the thing is with tabletop RPGs, because by describing your character's actions and reactions, that is like using your controller in video games. But in video games, you can talk and use your controller. The game never stops. You can start talking and shooting and jumping and blah, blah, blah. But whenever in tabletop RPGs, you decide to talk about anything else, politics, whatever, what happened to you the other day, it's as if you're pausing the game or putting the controller down. And that's why they
yeah,
tell you, that campaign module. Oh, yes, a barrow maze. You will need 2 years to complete barrow maze. No, you actually need like 6 months or less, as long as you are role playing, right? Because it takes a long time every time you put down the controller to speak about this or that.
yeah. Well, there's definitely some truth to that. You break immersion and stuff like that, and especially people who are older or have less time to play, whether it's online or in person. If you say you're playing a game once a week in person, and you have maybe 4 hours, if an hour of that is spent, between maybe you eat dinner, you BS for a bit, how much time are you really gaming? So, but you want to have fun. You don't want to stop people from enjoying themselves in other capacities, but you have to balance it with I guess what you're there to do.
if
So
people are
especially if it,
friends in real life, it's probably harder to not chat about other stuff because
yeah,
you have subjects in common. But yeah, when you are older, you have less time to play. So
yeah,
What Mark said about the like RPG camps, I also used to have like those sleepovers that, hey, let's gather together. We are going to sleep over from Friday to Sunday. And
yeah,
yeah, we were playing the game. But every single time somebody went, there was this guy that was obsessed with Dragon Ball Z. And we were playing Dungeons and Dragons. And every single time he brought like a Dragon Ball Z analogy into the game. And we were like, oh man, why did you do that? Like we were all like enchanted with the elves and moving through the creepy forest. And then, oh, that's like Dragon Ball Z. But like,
yeah. Some people definitely have a fixation where they have to, they can't. They have to compare something to everything else, that they know. Which is fine, but if it gets too much, like you said, it might get distracting.
my solution is to work with that. If you want to reference like Dragon Ball Z, you can roleplay. You can actually say, "This reminds me of a legendary warrior. I don't know if it's real or if it's a myth, but supposedly he was able to shoot energy beams out of his hands." And then the other character's like, "Wow, you're nuts. That never happens, no." And then they start role playing, and
Yeah.
it's kept within the fantasy.
Is that
That's
Mark
Mark
Static?
doing washing the knives after he murdered the commie. Yeah.
Am I making noise again?
Is that the commie belt sander?
The Diskininator.
Yeah, it takes the
sometimes
epidermis
it's
right off.
too much sound. I think I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that a microphone or a headset?
I'm actually wearing earbuds.
Okay, so that's maybe that.
I have headphones that like headsets. I never use. I don't know.
I stopped using it.
Nice.
It didn't work. There's always
Yeah,
problems.
I've got echo cancellation on. I don't know.
Well, now it's not making any weird noise.
Okay.
I don't know if noise cancellation in Restream works. It worked on Zoom, I remember, when we were playing with using it Zoom.
Mhm.
Zoom, if you cancel the noise, it wouldn't. Even if you were wearing a headset, it wouldn't be. But in Restream, I don't think it works that well.
Oh, okay.
Abraham brought something up, like his first experiences, getting into role playing, and I don't often hear how people started. Like what got you into it? Like, was it like your cousin looking at his books? Was it that first book you saw in a store? Was it something you heard about, you read in a magazine, you watched the Mazes and Monsters movie? Like what was it? Um, like for me, like my cousin got the I don't know. I think I got Redbox Basic, but he had the set before that, which was what, Menser? Was it Menser and then it was Moldvay
You're talking
or
about the 83 book. Yeah, that's Menser. If
yeah.
you're talking about Moldvay was 81.
Okay, so he might have had the Moldvay set, and then I got the later one. But whatever it is, he had D&D, first, and I saw that, and that blew me away because at the time I loved anything that was fantasy and stuff like that. I was like, oh, what is this? And he explained it to me, and he let me look at the books, and I don't know at what point. I think he gave me his book, and then later on I ended up getting the Red Box Basic set. But that was my first role playing game. Um, and then from there I went on to, I couldn't get all the AD&D books, but I started like combining that with AD&D. I got like the first edition player's handbook, and like it was in like the back of a KB Toys. I saw it on the rack. I was like, oh my god, and the comic stores I went to back then might have had some uh, role playing stuff, but most of the time I didn't know what it was, or I didn't know which products were good. And then there was a game store in New Jersey called the Game Room, and they had role playing games. That was the first time I ever saw like a bunch of role playing games in one spot, and I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. They had miniatures, and I messed around with that for a long time, and I think the next thing I got was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles by Palladium, which got me into Palladium games. But everybody comes into the hobby, through a different doorway. Like either someone they know, gets them into it, or they take a chance on a book. Nowadays it's a lot more commonplace, more mainstream than it was when we were growing up. So, but I still like to hear those stories. Like, what was the first thing you played? What was the first book you owned?
I started with the same thing as you started, the Menser, but it was exactly when it was released in Portuguese. It was the first and the only thing that was translated to Portuguese, not Brazilian, because Brazilians have translated lots of stuff. But in Portugal, the only thing that was translated, I think the plan was to translate the other boxes, but they only translated the red box. It was in 1988 or 1989. I can't remember exactly when.
Oh wow!
But I was playing those what is called fighting fantasy games, book games, and
Yeah, I like all that. Yeah.
I knew there was something else called role playing games who took it to another level. When it was released in Portuguese, I said, "Well, I'm going to buy it and try it." But it took
Some of
long.
those fighting fantasy games were such a pain. The books were such a pain, like very complex. Like you had to follow like a very
Yeah.
precise road to get the best ending, and then you had to backtrack and and then now I need to choose option A instead of C. But sometimes it was completely random. Like if you decided to pick a flower or not, that changed the entire thing.
Yeah. But there was fun that I played several times just to try different choices, different options. Some of them were, I didn't really like them, but I can't remember the names anymore. I remember there was one about a mansion was a horror game. A horror
It has
Yeah.
game.
several horror scenarios.
Well, there was
There was
Choose Your Own
actually
Adventure. There was Fighting Fantasy. They had the Lone Wolf books, which were pretty cool. I don't know if they made it out to you. They brought that stuff back recently. They made a whole full-fledged role-playing game about it. I have no idea if it's any good. But
Have you
the
played
book,
the Lone Wolf video game for PC? I recommend it. If you
no.
haven't, it really preserves the spirit of the books. Wow. Like it combines video game with choose your own path in an exceptional way. I was incredibly surprised.
Oh wow. They
Mhm.
did that with the sorcery books, I think. The Steve Jackson and
The Warlock at Firetop Mountain,
yeah.
that's also a really good game. The video game, also, Chef's Kiss. Incredible.
So I got
and
into gaming kind of a weird way. I was at a science camp. We were doing microbiology at this small
Nerd.
college.
Oh, sorry. What?
Yeah, exactly. At this small college in Louisville, Kentucky. And suddenly, two guys on our way out to get picked up by our parents start talking about dice and dwarves and dragons and a whole lot of other things. And I'm going, what are you guys talking about? And one of them turns around and says, we're talking about D&D. And I was like, what the hell is the D&D? And not long after that, I got the Moldvay basic set. And had my first game session on a camping trip with a fellow camper about my age. It was me running it and him playing it. So my first experience was not as a player, but as a DM. It was still a lot of fun. I only halfway knew what I was doing. I read it from cover to cover and was still trying to grasp the concepts. So that's basically how I got into it. And, it didn't take me long. I mean, I got my little black book set. I actually have my original Traveler 3-book set in the box with all the little, extra books that came out and certain supplements. It was for me. It was there was an outfit called Those Crazy Games, in Louisville, Kentucky, and another one called Spencer's Gifts. And Spencer's Gifts, everybody enjoyed going to because that's where they had the naughty
Yeah,
stuff.
the
about
marital
women.
aids.
Well, they didn't have the marital aid so much, but they did have really risque posters. And it's like,
Yeah.
when you're 13, you go through and you start paging through the posters. But they also had Call of Cthulhu. So I took one look at the cover of that old
and
box
Samantha
set, and
Fox.
this is I still have that. It's the first edition box set put out by Sandy Peterson and Company. And I took one look at the cover and said, "Oh, I've got to read that." And I had never even read H.P. Lovecraft. Needless to say, I started looking for it after that. So that's how I got into the game. It was actually accidental.
That was your
I
gateway
suppose if
drug.
I had not attended that camp, I would never have known, or if I had, it would have been a lot later.
But I think that's the thing about the era, though, is that these games were, mysterious to people because you didn't know what it was about, and then when you heard what they were about, you're like, oh wow, that's cool. I want to try that, and it wasn't part of the mainstream pop culture. It wasn't everywhere. So it was almost
No, it wasn't.
being initiated into something. Oh, this is the secret world I'm entering. You found, the wardrobe from Narnia. And you're like, oh, what's in here? And now it's like, oh, it's on the shelves at Target and Walmart, and there's this guy named Matt Mercer, and he's gonna play with a bunch of celebrities, and then he's gonna go cry wearing a shawl for a bit, and it's in everybody's faces, you know. So it was a lot more wondrous, I think, back
yeah,
then.
and it probably worked better because of that. I think
Yeah.
the fact that it was something weird. Here in Portugal, no one knew about it. Basically, it's just
And
I don't
and
know.
also
Playing
And
with
also,
the
like the kids today aren't getting beaten up in the schoolyard over it. Like when I was a kid, like not even just role playing books, anything like a fantasy novel, especially those choose your own adventure books, like you had to be brave to walk around in recess with one of those things, clutched in your hand because you knew the kid with one eyebrow was going to come over and try to belt you. So you either learn to fight, which I did. I won some, I lost some, or you learn to run away, or you learned like what the inside of a dumpster smelled like, and those were your options. Kids now have very little survival skills because they don't have to fight for these things. So you had even more, a greater love for the hobby when you knew like maybe you got a bloody nose one day, carrying that unearthed arcana around.
Yeah, it's a bit like a stolen valor thing because nowadays they go like, "Watch out! You need safety words because tabletop RPGs are unsafe. Be careful."
Yeah, yeah.
But they don't know. They don't know a single thing about what being unsafe is.
Yeah, and we were blowing up things in the woods, with firecrackers, and we were, my cousin and I, we would build models so that he could put them on fishing wire and then set fire to them as we filmed them with like a 35 millimeter camera. Like, what kids are doing stuff like that today? Zero.
Well, you used to
It
be
was
able to wander all over the place, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
what I did. I would either get on my bike or just start walking. And the next thing I'd be like 3 farms over and 5 miles from the house. And, you could do that. And nobody was afraid that you were off dead in a ditch somewhere. I don't know.
No,
It was a
okay.
different era.
Screw them. Screw the kids. Where are they?
I was actually in the unfortunate position of being like it was the what they call the satanic panic in Mexico, but it came a bit later after the US. But I always say it's the Christian panic because the Satanists were doing their crazy, disgusting shit on the side, but the Christians were the ones doing this. And I was in the Christian school, and they were like, "You play Dungeons and Dragons, you are the son of El Diablo, of the devil." And one time, I actually had the entire classroom chasing me around the recess. I'm like, "What? Oh, just for playing tabletop RPG."
yeah. It was real stigma attached to it.
I don't think we had a satanic panic. It was so non-mainstream that not even the church ladies knew about it. So
It was very American and a bit on the British side, I would say, because like in America and in the UK is where we are notorious for having those sorts of situations.
yeah,
Yeah.
didn't reach some of it.
I think the D&D books especially taught me more about religion and other cultures and stuff like that than school did. So now people bash these books that Guy Gaxon Arson made, like, oh, these guys were uptight white guys and racist and all this other stuff, but really they were presenting to kids things that they might not normally be presented with, or exposed to different cultures. Like, I'm a mutt, so I have all types of different ancestry, but I didn't know anything about the Celtic mythos or the Norwegian mythos. I didn't know the gods of Nuon and Cthulhu and stuff like that. So that made me seek out those books. Like the Fritz Lieber stories, Fafner and Gray Mouser and stuff like and it enhanced my ability to read. When I was a kid, I was reading at college level because I was deep diving into these books that were filled with history, and they were filled with culture, and they were filled with folklore, and learning all these strange foreign words, and hearing about authors that no one would ever turn me on to otherwise, unless I looked appendix N, like, oh, what's this, what are these things based on. So that was great.
And they reveal their ignorance so much, like calling them racists. Like back then, we had so many crazy races. We had the classic races. We had the gnomes, the elves. We would either call them species even, but you could also role play in Gamma World like a obsidian black individual with who knows how many mutations coming out of your body. Like it was so exciting to play as someone different from yourself. There was no
Yeah.
racism whatsoever. It was exactly the opposite, exploring the possibilities of getting into someone else's shoes and looking at the
Well,
fictional world.
people think of extremes because they feel like, well, if so and so is not represented on page 9, then they must be excluded from this game, which is the opposite. Like, you didn't need to see yourself on every page. You could play anything. Anyone could literally play anything. Nobody was excluded. They didn't tell the kid in the wheelchair that he couldn't play. They didn't tell the kid in the wheelchair that he had to be in a wheelchair as a paladin. None of this nonsense. What are you rocking out to, Mark? You getting signals from space?
I'm trying to come up with a theme song since the one I created was disapproved.
Oh, I didn't think. I thought it was cool, but it sounded like you had some space rock on or something. You know, like some.
Yeah, it's like I mess with all kinds of stuff here at the house.
Had like a Hawkwind vibe to it.
Yeah, it does actually. It's a really kind of heavy synth.
Dungeon synth is pretty incredible. Like every time I hear Dungeon synth, it gets me into this mindset, like that, like a pocket dimension sort of mindset. And I think a lot of sessions in current times could benefit from that magical feeling of it's just you and your friends in the dungeon. Watch out.
Yeah.
I think that any tools you can use to pull people into the game are probably legitimate. I have in the past. I've used music. It used to be you would buy these CDs of gaming style music, right? So you could, and sometimes you just get, soundtracks from your favorite fantasy film. Like a lot of people use the soundtrack from Conan the Adventurer.
Sure.
Right. So, but you could also actually buy soundtracks like of old Halloween music. Those were great for Call of Cthulhu sessions. If you got the right ones, you keep it on a very low level. And then there's all this sound of wind blowing and rafters creaking and all this kind of stuff. Nowadays, with the advent of the internet and AI, I think people have, and I've just started to explore this, a great opportunity to create custom images, to illustrate the adventure, to create short video clips, to create music specifically for the game. These are opportunities that we didn't have in the past. We kind of had to come up with what we came up with. I think horror games in particular benefit from tools like that because it can be difficult to get people into the game. It's not like, back when you were 18 and you found the scary basement in a halfway unused, college building. And of course, it becomes a lot easier for everybody to get into it then. Because people can hardly see what's going on in the room, period. But most of us don't play our games that way anymore, especially when we're online. So anything you can use, like I've played in a couple of cyberpunk games where I used dark synthwave and techno to kind of give people a sense of the setting. Because if you're talking about a chase scene happening and you've got a bunch of gangers on motorcycles coming after you and the firefight's broken out going down the road, you start banging out some perturbator or carpenter brute and it's like it pulls them into the action. Now they feel like they're in something cinematic. And to be honest, Cyberpunk doesn't work any other way than as a cinematic game, in my opinion. It's hard to get people into it otherwise.
For a moment, when you mentioned that, I thought if you meant the original, like Cyberpunk, I was thinking, oh no, perhaps Mark was playing. I really want to stay at your house. That music that they kept playing over and over because of the Cyberpunk video game and the Cyberpunk anime. Everybody was playing it everywhere.
Yeah.
No. I mean, you could definitely make this work with New Flesh. New Flesh is a little grimmer. By design. It's much more like Gibson's actual. If you really want to play in Gibson's sprawl, play New Flesh. Don't play Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is more like what was his name? Who wrote John Doss Williams? What was his name? Oh, I can't believe I can't remember it. But he wrote Hardwired, which I've got here on my shelf somewhere.
There's
the Cyberpunk game that R. Talsorian has out is much more like his vision of Cyberpunk than Neuromancer.
There was a book about inspired by Hardwire, right? For
Walter John Williams, correct?
Walter John Williams, yeah.
Did they make it into a movie too, or is that just a similar title?
Now, they did not make Hardwired into a movie, no. That hasn't happened.
The Cyberpunk anime is really good. Like, it is a masterpiece. It is one of the best series that you can ever see. Incredible.
That's all.
Now, they have made Ready Player One into a movie. And that is later Cyberpunk, to be fair.
That's two.
There's a different chain of cyberpunk. There's like 3 generations of cyberpunk. You have Gibson, you have Walter John Williams, and then I'm trying to remember the third guy's name. And they're all just a little bit different, but they're all considered cyberpunk. I'd have to look it up. I guess I ought to write an article on X about cyberpunk, because that's something I've really, especially having discovered New Flesh and playing some New Flesh and having engaged with the setting. It's like, okay, maybe it's time to talk a little bit about cyberpunk and the intersection between cyberpunk and
New Flesh has
tabletop role-playing.
the Burroughs influence too, which Judd likes.
Yeah, and and not just Burroughs, but Naked Lunch, the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, which, to be honest,
my brain's shutting down.
I've tried to read the Burroughs book. It's a hard read, man.
What's the director that they made fun of in Rick and Morty? Who did Videodrome? I think. But he did. Yeah, Cronenberg. Yeah, like it just escaped from my head. I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, he did Naked Lunch as well. It's better to see the movie than to read the book, definitely.
Yeah, the book is
Well, yeah, a drug-addled mind wrote it.
Cover once. The other times I tried to read it, I just read bits of it because there's no point reading it all. It's just there's no story. It's just, or maybe there's a story, but it's...
that's where he invented his cut-up technique, right?
Yeah.
Because the truth is, after years of doing heroin, he had difficulty maintaining the focus to do a complete narrative.
I'm sure he had to do that too.
Well, sometimes he'd be like trying to jump off his desk in his underwear, while trying to write his story. So he was out there, and he had to be reined in. And who was the other guy who was like his
David Lynch and David Lynch was also a great director for doing that kind of stuff. Cronenberg is great for that body horror. He if you want to bring the ick factor, anything Cronenberg does has that ick factor, it seems.
Still haven't watched his latest movie.
I have not.
Oh, was that the one with the dead wife or whatever? The people who were like being preserved.
I haven't watched his latest movie.
Is that the one though with the something to do with the dead bodies and I guess they're.
I'm trying to find what is the latest one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think someone had sent the trailer for it.
Okay, I can't find it. I don't know what's wrong here with this.
To Mark, you were talking about music. I like music sometimes, and I remember going to a con one time, having like a tape deck with me, and a tape of because I was doing Torg, so I had like a multi-genre soundtrack of things from soundtracks I owned, but like also instrumental music and stuff. And that was really before before I was using MP3 players. I mean, other people they had their iPods and stuff, but I was still using tape decks and things like that because I'm always the legacy tech person. But and nowadays my friend will use Alexa and shout out play Thomas Bergeron or play such and such, and sometimes it's good, but it could be distracting. Like I'd rather have it like situational, where like if you go into a chase you cue up some music, or if you go into a battle you play some music, or maybe ambient sound effects, like if the characters are in like a crowded subway station, you have and YouTube's great for that because you can always find something, white noise or background noise, or like Abraham was saying, like the sounds of the forest, and it's cool, but as long as it's not too distracting. Like some people, I've seen people run games Especially now you have these VTTs like Alchemy and stuff, and they're blasting the music, or you have to lower your settings. It can be too distracting. If it's just in the background low, it's not too bad. I think some people definitely overdo it. Um, and I think the newer VTTs are even kind of like over the top because I don't need a bell and a whistle for everything because most of these things always took place in our minds, right? So some set pieces are great, but I don't need every piece of the role playing game to be a visual or audio or this or that. But people buy it up. They get all these subscriptions for it, and sometimes less is more. Because it should be taking place, most of it at least, in your head, right? um
Well, less is certainly easier. I mean, if you're wanting to do quick pickup gaming, that's the only problem with using lots of tools is it can be difficult to get people
yeah.
um, to get into the game because the truth is it takes too much time. I should point out that complicated rule sets create the same problem. If you're
Yeah.
just wanting to do some pickup games at your friendly local gaming store, you should probably have a fairly simple and straightforward rule
Yeah,
set.
especially the people who, I mean, listen, I think for someone to start role playing games, even if they've never played before, they need absolutely zero knowledge of the rules. No one should have to go into a game knowing every rule. I mean, some things help, but they should more be told what their character could accomplish. Like a range of things. Like, hey, you're an elf, you do magic, you're in a fantasy world, and go. And that's really all they need. But now, uh, things that are too complicated. Sure, you can get people lost in the rules and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it definitely helps to have something simple, to introduce them, or to work with a new group just to see how everybody functions together. Sure.
I think that it's very important for people to understand that they don't need to learn the entire rule set. Like you only need
Yeah.
a few basic things. And I even introduced people to tabletop RPGs with very complex systems. We're talking about Hackmaster with the rules of bleeding and passing out from the shock, but it's very simple. You're a game master, you describe the situation, you tell the players that they can interact with that situation. I
Yeah.
open the door, I try to open the chest, I approach this strange symbol on the wall and take a closer look at it. And then, as the game master, you describe what happens, or if you call for a roll, and roll your 20 sided dice, add your melee bonus, like if you're introducing someone to tabletop RPGs, and so on it goes. It's very simple. They describe their actions, and you tell them what to roll. Roll this, roll that.
Yeah. That's the thing. They should People get hung up sometimes on the character sheets, and you should never be limited by that, or the rules, knowledge of the rules. It should be, boiled down to, what does your character want to do? What do you want to do?
I was laughing because I remember in the cult session. Remember, Miguel, the characters of the group were trying to find information on one of the groups, like a cult, a sect that they were investigating. And Miguel had on his character sheet something like, what was it, like tracker? Well, so like a skill that is absolutely perfect to find. And I was like, Miguel is going to use it. Here's the moment, and he didn't use it in the entire session. So yeah, don't look at the character sheets, but every now and then definitely take a look at the to see what your character is capable of doing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's better to know. Yes.
But yeah, you definitely, you don't want to limit people to what they can do. I think a lot of younger players, newer players, are hung up on the mechanics. Like, well, my paladin has this feat and blah blah blah. But the approach to the problem might be simply talking to someone, role playing it out, or winning the confidence of the peasants in the village, or outsmarting the monster, or like if you ever play OD&D, like the Little Brown books, like with somebody like Griff Morgan. Well, your characters are very basic, in what they can do. They're very crunchy. They can't do a whole lot. And if they just try to run in and fight everything, they're going to get their clocks cleaned. So, I played that at a con, and we had a good group, and everybody knew this type of game. You have to nickel and dime the monsters. You have to have tactics. You have to work together. You have to figure out everything, tactics, design of the dungeon hallways, what can help you. um, and I think that's lost on some people. Like they can't get they can't get themselves into that mindset of, okay, I'm a dude with the sword. I'm not a superhero. I only do this much damage. So how can I survive? How can I make the best use of my resources? How can I whittle down this monster, or at least survive it? If I can't kill it, can I avoid it somehow? Um, and that's hard to get across to people who played like maybe fourth edition D&D that was set up like an MMORPG.
MMORPG.
Yeah, because
I would
yeah,
I would say that the one that is a great fault concerning that is Gary Gygax, because he never understood roleplay. So he's the guy, the guy that said there should be a rule for that. No, so whenever someone was attempting something that was not within the particular portfolio of the character, uh, there was no rule for that, and a lot of people got into that mindset. And
yeah,
the Gary Gygax actually ran some sessions that the characters got into inescapable situations because they were not able to creatively employ their attributes or even their weapons or tools in unorthodox ways. There is this very famous, like one of almost like a meme situation where his adopted son, Rob Kuntz, that is, he's Robillard from Greyhawk, the famous Rob
yeah,
Kuntz, right? He had the brilliant idea of going solo into one of the most dangerous dungeons. He ended up cornered by whites, the ones that they touch you and
yeah,
they drain your level of experience. And he was about to die, and suddenly Gary Gygax, oh, roll a die, a single die. Makes the roll. I rolled 3 or 4, I don't remember the number. And Gary Gygax was, you are in luck. It was all a dream. You're still alive. And I was, holy deus ex machina to save his adoptive son. So whenever they say that Rob Kuntz, he actually survived the Temple of Elemental Evil and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I know how he survived. But what I'm trying to say is that Dave Arneson was the one that was telling you, if you want to use your weapons in a different, unorthodox way, just do it. If you want to use your
yeah,
attributes, maybe you have a fighter that is very charismatic. Some people could be thinking, what? Charismatic fighter? That's useless. You're going to be in social situations only all the time because that's the only place where you can use your charisma. But what if in combat you start to distract your enemy with your charisma? You cannot defeat
yeah,
me, the greatest swordsman of all time, or something. And the enemy is like, oh, who is this? Or if you use your intelligence to pinpoint the weak spot of the enemy or some weak spot in the armor, then a good dungeon master will tell you, roll intelligence to see if you figure out the weak spot.
yeah,
So all of those attributes, charisma, wisdom, intelligence, it's all about how you can use them even in battle. Like even if it's charisma, there is a use for charisma in battle. Tricking, provoking, intimidating, and a lot of people did not take advantage of that high charisma or high wisdom or high intelligence warrior or fighter.
and when you think of what these games were based on, like some of the heroes from mythology and stuff like that had to trick the monsters somehow, or think up some other solution. It wasn't necessarily, well, Hercules, bashed him with a club, or Perseus, chopped off Medusa's head. There were other things involved. I think that's why, as a kid, I loved the Clash of the Titans movie, because like you get to see a little bit of that, and or the Ray Harryhausen, like Sinbad movies. You saw the hero, like using his wits. And that's cool, and that's what you want to kind of emulate in these games, whether it's fantasy or any other genre. Whether it's Cthulhu, if it's people trying to figure out a mystery. Well, they can't, you know, physically defeat these ancient horrors, so they have to stumble onto what's going to work. And that's any role playing game. Um, Finding out the solution to the
Especially, it's never possible to destroy the enemy, at least not physically.
yeah.
Usually, you cannot destroy it anyway, and it destroys you. So. But that's
And that's
another
what I don't like of the current edition of Call of Cthulhu or Call of Cthulhu for the purists. They have the idea roll. Oh, you don't know what to do? Make an idea roll. And the keeper will basically tell you what you need to do. Oh, you need to go to this
Oh,
place.
that's cheating.
And then you have the push your roll. I think the push your roll mechanic is perfect, but here they tell
Yeah.
you I want to push my roll, right? You say, hey, I push my roll, and the keeper, okay, little Jimmy, but if you push your roll, if you fail your roll, you will go into jail. But if you succeed, you pick the pocket of the bad guy, and it kills the suspense so horribly. And I swear that is how they describe it in the current core book of Call of Cthulhu.
But my friend runs. I guess he runs the earlier edition of it, and it has the the push roll, but it's usually if you try, you have to explain what you're doing differently, and then if you fail, it could be horrific, So you're gambling, basically, which is cool, and that's something most people I think will do with their characters. So I kind of like that mechanic, but yeah, I don't like how it's described the way you said. Um, it's too namby-pamby, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, because it's a good mechanic, but they explain it in the worst execution possible.
Is
Yeah.
that the what, 7th edition?
7th edition, and there are a lot of things to like about 7th edition, but those things, oof. And some people will be like, but remember, in the previous editions of Call of Cthulhu, you could actually destroy a tank with a shotgun. But no keeper is going to allow you to destroy a tank with a shotgun. Like, apply a bit of common sense. I think the designers would think. Nobody actually thinks that you will be able to destroy a tank with a shotgun.
Well, that's precisely what got Sandy Peterson in trouble with certain people, including an individual who will not be named. But that this guy who's been doing this since the early '80s had the audacity to say, you know what, don't bother with the raw thing. Run it the way it works at your table. Oh, what do you mean? You're telling us not to use your rules? No. Use the rules if it works at your table. And don't be an idiot when some old dude gives you advice. They hate grognards. That's I don't know if it's a generational thing, but it seems like we have a current generation of guys who absolutely hate the grognards.
But I think
Don't tell us about how you did things. Why not?
You're also talking about people who want to one up the old coots. They want to, make
and yet everything they do is an imitation.
Yeah, they want to make themselves noticed by bashing some other guy who's giving them like the basically the version of fatherly advice, but in role playing games, like, and all it is advice of hey, this is a good way to go about it. You could take it or leave it, but you have so many people out there who are doing hot takes, and character
it's like
assassination.
a certain person whose claim to fame is they have a Kickstarter where they basically recreated white box D&D.
Yeah,
and they want to throw shade. It's like,
even
dude,
though
you're imitating anyway. What you complaining about?
Even though there was already a white box that was
exactly,
and a sword,
a white hack, a white box, a black hack. I mean, there's been swords and wizardry. Yeah, I'm going to do yet another version.
Yeah,
now he's an expert.
and listen, if that person might have had some good takes on it, might have done some cool things with it. I don't know.
Might have.
Because I chose not to buy it, but that's
hey, trends of sabotage. Like, there is a lot of sabotage everywhere you look. So in this case, they look at the old guys like, hey, they are obstacles, because otherwise people are not going to pay attention to me. They're going to be thinking of that they started the whole thing.
Yeah,
like
and that's what
eliminate them somehow.
That makes them as bad as Wizards of the Coast, though, because and that's why, like, I would say, like, our side of the hobby is failing, because there's so many people who they want to prop themselves up by tearing other people down, and that's not the way you succeed. Yeah, I mean, you have to, if you're selling something that's good, if you believe in it, and other people have an interest in it, that's enough to sell it on its own. You shouldn't have to go after the people who made the previous thing. You shouldn't have to say how much better your thing is than theirs, or
Perfect example of the opposite kind of person is Kevin Crawford.
Oh,
he just makes great stuff and doesn't say shit about anybody.
That's probably the best way to go, is to not be involved in all these forums, because that guy does well without even putting himself out there too much. That doesn't work for
And
everybody.
also, he's actually good at what he does, which, again, I'm
Yeah.
not going to name names, but I can name names. I can start talking about people who are mediocre. Stop redoing the same game from the 70s again and again and again, guys. Come on. Join
But
the
see,
modern OSR.
that's another thing. Like my thing is, I like to see the envelope pushed in something that people haven't seen before. And we know that there's a lot of things that, not that they're bad, but they're not anything cool or new, or it's just another take on the same genre, slightly different rules. But they're not really exploring what RPGs could be, and there's some pretty crappy RPGs out there that I don't personally like, but I still give them credit for being different, for trying to make something that looks different, that explores different territory, and that's great, and that's kind of what turned me on to the Red Rooms, because hey, they make a book about this, and I've never seen an RPG about this genre, and what the hell is this thing, and not everybody's out there doing it. There's some very odd people out there doing it who don't do it well, but not, there's really not a lot of new territory being examined.
Well, seeing the stuff that Miguel and Venger put out
Yeah,
really turned me on to the modern OSR, because it's like, oh, wait a minute. This is in the same spirit. It's got the same foundations, but they're actually doing something new with it. And so that's why I've got the Charles hardbacks sitting on my shelf, and I've got
yeah.
a whole bunch of Red Room games. And I've talked before about how Darker RPG pulled me in. It's like, oh my God, this guy hates commies worse than I do. He sends them to hell. I want to send commies to hell. I'm going to buy this book.
Like behind Abraham, you'll see almost every Free League book that they've made, right? And what's cool
There
about
you
Free
go.
League is that even though it's the same basic system, pretty much every game is different. I you can't just run Blade Runner with the rules from Aliens, because they're two different systems. And I think that's when a system works well, is when you adapt it to what you're trying to emulate. What genre, whether it's an IP like a movie property, or a particular setting. If the game is made around that setting to enhance it, it really works well. And I think a lot of people are just making carbon copies, or they take, like with 5e, they take the 5e base game and they slap a setting onto it, and they reskin the classes. Okay, it's a paladin, but it's a paladin, and instead of a sword, he's holding a laser sword, or a rifle, or whatever, and they do nothing to change the system. So that could be anything. You could just, yeah, sure, I could take a system and slap it on any game. I believe you could tell any story with any system, but when you have a system that suits what you're trying to do, it always works 100% better. It adds that flavor to it. Like the West End game Star Wars we were talking about, the original one, that was made for Star Wars. The system came out of Ghostbusters, but it wasn't Ghostbusters. The character points and force points came out of brownie points, but they didn't work the same. It worked the way that would work in the Star Wars movies. So that always impresses me when something is made that really suits the setting and what they're trying to portray. Sorry, that was a long-winded rant, but
No, it makes a lot of sense, because if you're going to be using a system that has been tried and true for who knows how many years, you want to adapt it to a particular theme, a particular genre. You cannot just take it, and that's why so many people used to criticize all of the D20 versions of who knows how many hundreds of media, because it was the same Dungeons and Dragons system, and they didn't change many things to represent these sorts of spell casting, or these drama, or these social situations. So it's all about
yeah,
that. Like in the case of the Red Room again, mm, maybe it was the original idea from Miguel, but he saw what was done before, and he said, "Well, the character creation system could be a bit deeper. Like not just I rolled fighter number 54. He like, oh, I rolled this fighter. He comes from this background, and he has this defect, and he also has this boon or something positive. that has been done in other tabletop RPGs, but not oftentimes in a more old school Renaissance type of game. At least not as they do it in the Red Room.
Yeah, the thing is, I played only D&D for a few years, and then I started playing other games. So when I started writing my own games, I decided to use OSR because everybody I was talking to was into the OSR. But my inspirations were mostly other games, so it was easier to think, well, okay, I'm going to use this the bones from this game, but the meat is coming from somewhere else. Uh, so it's I wasn't I didn't feel like it was untouchable. I said, well, I'll add what I want.
Yeah,
And
it's,
I
and it,
constantly criticize Gary Gygax for roleplay, but I think when it comes to rules, I think he did an excellent job. Like the system still holds today. I have no problem with the armor class. It could be not the best, the most simulationist system, but it's a system that you can easily learn and apply to many situations.
yeah.
And simulationist games sometimes get too complicated, overly complicated.
Well,
It's
that's the
because you
thing.
can. Go ahead.
Well, it's a balance between how detailed you want it to be or how abstract, and if abstract suits the purpose, then that's good enough, and but if you want to have something that's every sword blow, every feint and stuff like that, has some kind of mechanic, that might be cool for a game where you're doing a lot of swashbuckling or dueling and stuff like that. So it depends on the game. But I don't think a bare bones system or lesser rules necessarily makes it bad. And I don't think a game that's heavy in mechanics makes it a good game. Like the original Traveler, you had to account for every pound that's in that ship. The computers weighed tons and tons, and you had to be a NASA scientist to figure out how you're going to get to the next planet. Which
Oh, don't get
that's
me
still fun.
started on Traveler and NASA
Yeah,
because
that's still fun for the
you have to
players.
learn the value of speed of light. Take a look
Yeah,
at the coordinates for the pyramid of Giza and compare it with the speed of light. They pull
yeah,
those values out of their asses. Like sometimes they're just telling you this because they think, well, people are not smart. They aren't going to do their calculations or check if that is real. I am not joking. Look at the coordinates for the pyramid of Giza and take a look at the value of speed of light. Oops. And then the AA goes like, oh well, yeah, it's a coincidence, right?
yeah.
Even though it's a very specific value, it turns out it's a coincidence. Now they're pulling things out of their ass.
So here is something that I've always kind of wondered about when people start talking about old school rules. Oftentimes they mean D&D alone, but D&D was not the only set of old school rules. There's other legitimate old OSR games from that era. There's Traveler, there's Tunnels and Trolls,
Yeah.
there's there's Call of Cthulhu.
Barterwin.
There's
Yeah.
there's a lot of them that exist, and some of them have kind of come sideways into the modern OSR movement. For instance, Traveler now has Cepheus engine.
Yeah.
So, you're starting to get very similar stuff. Now, I'll grant you, when it comes to OSR, it's really, third edition with the OGL and the SRD. This was people's opportunity to recreate systems that Wizards had abandoned, and that's where the OSR got its start. So I'm not disputing that historically. I'm just saying, if you think about it objectively, there are a lot of old school rule sets, and some of them were really odd. If you go back and look at first edition Gamma World, which I loved, by the way, I loved playing that. That was one of my early games. It is so weird. It's a very weird game.
Do you mean because of the random mutations or what specifically?
Oh, so many of the rules were just a little bit odd in that first edition. Because remember, that was still early enough in their history, TSR's history. If I recall, the first edition, which was the one I had, it was still like the book was still black and white, and it had that weird typeface. But the rules themselves could be odd. I'm trying to remember. There was some, especially when you did like the random mutations, you could end up with some really wild, almost godlike characters coming out of that. And then you had the pure strain humans, and the supposed balance was that the pure strain humans had a better chance of using ancient technology.
And we usually get along better with other individuals for some reason.
Supposedly. I did like how they handled alignment. That's always something I thought Gamma World did a good job with, because they retained the idea of alignment, the white box concept of alignment, which is alignment is not about your personality, it's which side you're on. And they retained that even as mainstream D&D started to kind of go more in this sort of psychological direction because of how Gary defined alignment in AD&D, even though he did that largely because he had the cosmic wheel cosmology going on, where all the various alignments were represented in various, astral dominions. But Gamma World was so wild, but it was not the only kind of weird and wild game from that era.
Metamorphosis Alpha, and
yes,
I never thought of OSR as just being D&D. Like, it's, old school means anything from that era. And, like Tunnels and Trolls, I had never played until years later. Not a great system. I don't like the dice, system that it uses, but it was great setting. But you had lots of stuff that came out, adjacent to D&D that was pretty cool. And some of it's coming back, like Arduin is in the whole Barrows and Borderlands set now. That's and so is the OD&D stuff. And you got the whole Tecumel, Empire of the Petal Throne. So resurgence, people are playing that now. You have
and people forget that was its own game originally. I mean, I have the original Tecumel book. I have a reprint of it. I don't have the original. I have the reprint, and it had its own rules. Now, what's interesting is a lot of those systems were also incomplete. Like if you try to play Little Black Book Traveler using the 3 original books, superficially you might think it's a complete system. But then you start reading it more closely and you realize there's lots of little things that are likely to come up in a science fiction game that they don't really go into very much detail about. And that's because, that to me, that's one of the real distinctives of many early OSR games, is that they're almost an assemblage of subsystems rather than a unified whole. By the time you get to 3rd edition, it's a unified whole. Everything is consistent and coherent with other rules in the same system. But if you look at a lot of the earlier, the true OSR games from the earliest phases, it's like they were like, okay, oh wait, during this session we had to come up with these set of rules. Let's just put it in the book. And it might have no direct connection to anything else that they're doing. I've oftentimes thought that that's kind of how Armor Class, the kind of backwards Armor Class thing happened, is because that actually was an inheritance from an entirely separate game that they were trying to push. And the truth of the matter is, if they had thought it through, Gary didn't even want to use AC. That was for monsters. He wanted to use the grid. Do you remember playing AD&D with the grid? The actual attack grid? It's really neat because
the combat matrix.
The combat matrix.
Yeah. Do you mean like the Thaco or Thaco or what are you talking about?
Well, see, they didn't use Thaco in 1st edition. They used.
They did.
That was not the default system.
Yeah.
That was not the default system. The default system was the combat grid. And in the combat grid, Armor Class actually makes sense because they really do mean armor class. So if you wear chainmail, certain weapons have a better or lesser chance to do you injury. Mm-hmm. That all went away when Thaco became the default system in 2nd edition AD&D. That kind of all went away. And that was a borrowing from BX, because that was how BX simplified it, was everything became Thaco. But the original goal was to use the combat grid, because that's why Gary had all these oddball pole arms spelled out the way he did, because each of them would have a slightly different effect on different kinds of armor.
You
I also
reminded me
tried
of.
that playing that when I played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons second edition. I always had that. Oh, if you hit with a piercing weapon and you are using chainmail, it actually has a bonus when going into you. You know.
You reminded me of something. Do you ever hear of Tom Moldvay? Who obviously worked on D&D. He
Yeah.
also made Lords of Creation. He made like a very simple, almost like a one-page system called the Challenges game system, and that was like a
Challenges game system.
yeah. Look that up, and the combat in that is actually pretty a lot more realistic as opposed to regular D&D combat, where the result of your roll, gives you, I guess, pluses or minuses, in damage and things like that. So it's very like, um, the better you hit, the more damage you do. Armor has a certain approach to it that's different from basic D&D. So it was actually pretty cool. And I had only heard about it like maybe several years ago, but I said that's definitely a thing that could use, like a modern use, I guess. Um, and there's lots of stuff that came out over the years that kind of just fell by the wayside. Maybe it wasn't mainstream, but that was like one of the last things he worked on. And even Lords of Creation, which is kind of goofy, um, is a extension of what they wanted D&D to be originally, where you start off as basically nobody and you ascend to godhood. They had the basic expert immortals sets back in the day with BX. So, BECMI, I think it's called when they abbreviate it. So it's kind of along those lines, with
Usually
Lords of
it's
Creation.
BECME, yeah.
Yeah,
BECME. So basic, expert, companion,
yeah.
master. And then the Immortals game was almost its own weird alternative system because a
Yeah,
lot
so
of
that
the
that's basically what Moldvay made with Lords of Creation, where you start out as like a normal adventurer, and at some point you have the ability to build your own worlds. And the idea behind that was, um, when you became that powerful, you stopped being a player, and now you were a GM, and the world that your character created was now the game world. So I thought that was kind of cool, and it's something that really never came up in D&D, but that was always the idea that was kind of in there. um, so things like that would be nice to see a newer version of, for the modern era. Um, there's
I
there's,
think
there's a
in
lot.
current times there are various systems that have that high power level of play. I have reviewed
Yeah,
several of them. We're talking about attacks that could slice mountains in half, or when you can create pocket dimensions in the middle of the fight to suit your own ends. But yeah, I would I definitely think that you need an experienced game master because things can quickly spiral out of control.
yeah, and that's the thing. It takes, maybe a bit of work on the part of the GM, and the players have to be of a certain mindset, so it doesn't spiral out of control and get too stupid. But I guess eventually the goal is that you become, one of these godlike immortal beings who, building planets from scratch. And So I thought that was interesting. I played when I was a kid. I was combining, D&D and Lords of Creation and Arduin into kind of like one game. And I always said like, oh, I should go back to that and see how I could, work on that today to make something, maybe similar to that, or that captures the feel of that. Because we had a lot of fun with Lords of Creation. I guess I was in junior high school when we were playing that. Um, but the box set had the main rules, and then had the Book of Foes, which was basically the monster manual, and it had every D&D creature you can imagine, but also like robots and mythological creatures and gods and heroes from fantasy novels and mythology, all in one book. And I thought that was the greatest thing ever because it was all illustrated. So every page you're looking at, you're looking at a picture of some Greek hero one second, and the next page is, a robot, and the next page is a skeleton, and um, it was definitely didn't get the attention it deserved, I guess, because it came out of Avalon Hill. Um, but it was pretty cool.
You know what serves as great inspiration for those sorts of high level campaigns? The old Magic the Gathering novels. When Magic the Gathering was good and less politically driven, they had some really good books. Like, we're talking situations, the planeswalkers are pretty much like deities, but they get into situations like, watch out, and they have to jump inside of a structure because their enemies suddenly decided to turn the entire air, the oxygen around you, into soil, into earth. So
Oh.
they just, by a split second, they managed to jump away and they saved themselves. But one of them did not in that situation, and he got killed because imagine your pores, your lungs are filled with earth. That's your end. That's the end of it. So now they were in this like safe place, and they were like, how are we going to get out of this? And you had those creation type of battles where the very laws of reality are used against you.
Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's getting a little bit late here, and we've gone over the 2
Time for
hours.
bed.
Mhm.
Yeah, time for bed. Before
Time for bed.
right here. Okay, so thanks for coming, and you'll all be welcome next week for
Thank you.
another episode of Random Musings. Bye, guys.
Good talk.
See you.
Bye bye.